I specialize in the shopping APIs, the content and search APIs for shopping. And today, like we do every other week, we'll be talking about the content API for shopping. I have here with me one of our more vocal community members, Andrew LaMonica, and we're going to be recapping I/O, talking a bit about some library changes, and then reviewing a new change to the API, a new feature that was added since our last hangout. So first, let's talk about I/O. So I have some things I want to show you. So if you go to developers.google.com, we have all the event data from every talk that was at I/O, but in particular, the two talks we gave. So we gave a talk, myself and our product manager, Myra Soji, gave a talk on making product search or making Google Shopping work for you using the Content API. And as you can see here, this is at developers.google.com/events/io/GUIO 2012/400. Our talk was title 400. Excuse me, it was number 400. And on this page, we have a YouTube video of the talk itself. So if you want to watch the talk in its entirety, you're free to. We have the abstract. We have some headshots if you miss seeing my mug. And we also have the slides. So don't want to do that. So here you see my slide deck can actually be viewed. So I'll go over a few highlights from that talk in a short bit, but I also want to emphasize the other talk we gave. We talked about empowering local shopping through Google Product Search or through Google Shopping. This was not myself, but two of our wonderful engineers from Zurich. The video, again, in this link, the talk was number 401 rather than 400, but all the rest of the link is the same. Their presentation can also be retrieved as a PDF. My presentation was an HTML5 deck, so you can actually see it the same way it was presented. And of course, there's some headshots and an abstract as well before you get into it. So before I talk about my talk, a bit about theirs, they talked about how you can set up a Google Places account to actually have local product data associated with your Google Merchant Center account. And then from there, they used the Content API to insert an item with channel equals local rather than channel equals online. And then they used the inventory feed, which is one of our feeds other than the products feeds, to actually insert item data for particular stores associated with the Places account they created. It's a pretty interesting use case for people who are interested in setting up a local shopping account. They have contact information towards the end of their video for who within Google you can contact for getting that set up. So for my talk, some of the things I talked about that I want to review. The first thing we talked about was the debug dashboard. And this was a dashboard that allows you to review errors with your products after the fact. So if you have an insert that fails, or an update that fails, or delete that fails using the Content API, then you'll get the response immediately. But if you don't log that, then the response just goes away when the process with the RAM that's holding that response dies. It just gives the memory back to your machine, right? So if for some reason you're not saving that persistently locally, and you have a huge spike in errors, and you want to find out what happened, you can use the debug dashboard to actually determine what happened. Another thing that we discussed, something which we hadn't really had a whole lot of fanfare around the launch, was the data quality API. And that API is another service, just like the inventory service or the product service that I've already discussed today, as well as the multi-client account service that people are familiar with. But the data quality service within the API will actually allow you to get the same data quality report that you can get in the Merchant Center dashboard. And this is really great for things like updating certain information, if you have price discrepancies or other things like that. So I highly encourage either checking out the deck or watching the slides or both. So there are two other things I want to discuss before I open the floor for questions from Andrew. From what I hear, he doesn't necessarily have any questions. But two other things I want to discuss. Oh, Caroline's here. Wonderful.
Here.
One of our .NET library users is here, and she'll be happy to hear. The next thing I was going to announce, in the weeks leading up to I.O. as well as the week after I.O., I was able to write some patches for the 4 services that we were missing that are offered within the Content API. So we had implemented, prior to Google I.O., the products service, which is the main one you're using, as well as the managed accounts service. And in addition, we also implemented the 4 other services. So there's the user feed, which allows you to determine the users associated with a particular Merchant Center account, as well as to change permissions to add new users or to remove users from a particular account. This is particularly relevant for people who use managed accounts, because if they're creating a new sub-account for one of their clients, and maybe they want their clients to be able to see the data within that sub-account, they can programmatically add those accounts, they can add those users to that account using the users API. So we've added that service. In addition, we've added the data quality API. This is something Caroline personally asked for in one of our previous Hangouts. So we've implemented particular functions within our Content API service which allows for this. In addition, we have implemented, what are the other services? We've implemented the inventory service, which is what you'll be using for local shopping. And finally, we have implemented, it's just on the tip of my tongue. What is the 4th service? So I can't think of it right now. Let me just go to our documentation and just find out what it's called. So I'm navigating to our wonderful docs, developers.google.com/shopping-content. So we have the inventory feed, we have the users feed, we have, of course, the data feeds feed. So this is a feed which has been around a long time, but isn't necessarily used too much by our developers, but it allows you to set up scheduling for data feeds files through the API. Now this sort of contradicts our best practices, but some people who are mixing and matching data feeds with the API can actually find this feature useful. So we implemented those 4 services in addition to the 2 that were existing. Now, we didn't have anyone request it, but we also implemented these in the Python client library. And I'm currently wrapping up the additions to our PHP client library. So people who are wanting to access services other than the multi-client account service and other than the product service will actually be able to using our client libraries. So Caroline, do you have any particular questions about these implementations if you had a chance to look at them before I move on to the 3rd and final talking point I have?
I have not had a chance to look at them.
Okay,
so
great.
I'll have to do that. Sorry.
No, it's no worries. We had they were a single commit for each service. So we had 4 commits, and I think they're all at the head or the tip of the SVN repository. And then I don't know if there's been a release yet. I'm pretty sure there was a release after the 4th commit because it was so much new code. But I have a seat right next to the maintainer of the library now. I just moved my seat recently, and I was able to poke and prod him after I.O. to say, hey, here's my commits. Can you get them in? And can you release it quickly? So it's, like we discussed in early June or maybe late May, you wanted support for the data quality API. Well, now we have it. So I hope you use it. I hope you find the API within the service object easy to use. If not, I greatly encourage you to tell me what I did wrong and how it can be better, because I'm happy to make those changes.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, and so the final thing I wanted to talk about today is some updates we made. I need a new tab for this. Some updates we made to the managed accounts feed, and this is particularly relevant given some of the changes that were announced recently around the move to associating with AdWords product listing ads campaigns. So within the multi-client accounts feed, which I will go to in a second, we have added the ability to associate an account with an AdWords account. So we've just added a sub-attribute within the SC namespace called AdWords_accounts. And using this, you can have child elements, which are the attribute AdWords underscore account, not accounts, the singular rather than plural, again in the SC namespace. And you can say whether that account is active or inactive. And then, of course, the value of these XML attributes will just be the AdWords account ID. And an AdWords account ID is a 10-word ID with three digits separated by a hyphen and 3 more digits separated by a hyphen, and then the final 4 digits. So a bit about using this. So this is obviously needs to be used with the MCA feed, the Managed Accounts feed. So for someone who doesn't use multi-client accounts, they won't be able to use the API to associate a particular sub-account with an AdWords account, a sub-account within the Merchant Center account, that is. And the logic behind this is if you're not using a multi-client account, then chances are going through the settings through the actual Merchant Center probably is not as difficult. But if you're managing thousands or tens of thousands or even just tens of accounts, going through the Merchant Center and doing these AdWords accounts associations by hand for even 10 accounts is probably not going to be worth it, right? So a little bit about how this works. If you currently don't have any AdWords account associated with your account, or if you create a new account and you don't send AdWords accounts, what you'll get in the response is just an empty AdWords accounts link. And if you send in an insert request or in an update request, if you send an empty AdWords accounts link, it will actually delete any association. Excuse me, not an AdWords accounts link, an AdWords accounts XML element. If you send an empty XML AdWords accounts element, then it will actually delete any associations you have. However, if you don't send any AdWords accounts element, it won't make any changes to your existing account, but it will return an element that has the current list. So it will always be in the response, but it's not required to be in the request. And the reason is for people who have, for backwards compatibility, people who have implementations which aren't sending the element, we don't want them to leave it out and then either A, cause an error in their feed, or B, accidentally delete associations they didn't mean to delete. So that kind of describes the functionality of that. Do either of you have any questions? Andrew, we discussed a little bit before we started the Hangout. I figured you may have some questions after I demoed this feature, but I wasn't sure if it was interesting enough for you to care, because I know you guys aren't using multi-client accounts.
Yeah, we don't really have enough to do that, but I may use the get portion to provide some extra functionality to our internal tools.
Sure.
Because marketing is a different department than engineering.
Right.
I think the biggest problem we have with AdWords right now is or at least the biggest questions we have are related to how the URLs are going to be handled post migration to Google Shopping.
Sure.
Because we're going to want to make sure that our tracking is online on day one.
Right.
And right now we send different tracking codes through the different URLs.
Yeah, definitely.
One for Google Shopping, one for AdWords.
Right.
Is there any news on that yet?
No news yet. I haven't heard a whole lot. The team is working every day, obviously, to try to figure out the best way to do this migration. And when we know more, we're certainly going to write about it. We'll blog about it. We'll update our docs, etc. Your question in particular, I'm going to ask the team about, ask what the plans are, and see if we can get an answer. If we can, I'll post it to the forum, and maybe we can discuss it in our next Hangout 2 weeks from today. But if not, I'll try to give you an update on sort of the timeline on when we will know. And by the way, our next Hangout is going to be 2 weeks from today, so that'll be July 33rd or August 2nd for those who are using calendars like normal people. Caroline, do you have any questions as well? And also, Andrew, if you have other questions that you want to see answered about the migration beyond URLs and things like that, feel free. I'll be able to use this video. I'm not taking notes right now, but I can take notes after the fact. And take those questions back to the appropriate teams. So, Caroline, do you have any questions?
I do not. I've actually been pushed onto a different project temporarily, so I'm just trying to keep up with things until we return back. So
Sure.
you know how it goes.
Sure.
I do have. I will make my. I think I've made this in the past, but I'll make it one more time.
Please do.
Make
Please do.
my push for a feature request. It would be great if we could get impressions data back on the individual products.
Yes. Yes.
Because we're trying to pick what products we're going to want to
Yes.
really feature in the new world.
So nothing to announce right now, but keep your eyes peeled. Andrew and I actually discussed this at I/O in person. He was one of our guests, so it was actually great to see him in person. And you know, it is a feature that we've seen asked for quite a bit, and it is something that we're trying to figure out the best way to implement. Like I said, nothing to announce right now, but keep your eyes peeled on the Commerce blog and on the forum and other places. By the way, Caroline, thanks for coming to the Hangout, given the fact that you're not actively working on an implementation right now. It's great to have you as a part of the community still.
And I only missed the last two because one I was on vacation and the one I forgot you switched till Tuesday. And I was like, oh no!
So there wasn't one previous, or since the Tuesday one, because of I/O, we sort of had a big hiatus.
Sweet.
So you've only missed one. So
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm feeling good.
So Andrew, I think I've taken sufficient mental notes. I don't think I need to actually go back and watch the video after the fact. You want to know two things: how are we going to be handling URLs for these campaigns, and when or if are we going to get impressions data with the SC performance block that we get back when we make GET requests for particular items specifying performance start and performance end, which is a great feature if people aren't using it, which maybe we'll talk about in a Hangout in the future. Okay, guys, if you don't have any other questions, we'll wrap up and we'll see you July 33rd. Huh? August 2nd, that is, for people who want me to be correct.
All right, thanks, Danny.
All
That's
righty.
great. Thanks, Dan.
See you guys.
Bye.
Cool. Oh.